Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Beitzah. We are up to Perek Bet, Mishnah Vav. Today's Mishnayot should be Leilu Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana, Aranbayev, and Eliyahu ben Burcha Israelov, Menuchatam Began Eden, Amen. And Leavdil ben Chaim Nachaim for the Refuah Shlema, Bacha Bat Esther, and Daniel Shalom ben Rosa, Betoch Shah Chulei Israel. This Mishnah records three more rulings of Bet Shammai that concern Yom Tov. The Mishnah begins, Shelosha Devarim Rabban Gamliel Machmir Kedevrei Bet Shammai. In three matters regarding Yom Tov, Rabban Gamliel rules strictly following the view of Bet Shammai. The Tosfot Yom Tov explains, although Rabban Gamliel descended from Hillel, he followed the opinion of Bet Shammai in these three rulings. En tomnin et hamin mi Yom Tov l'Shabbat. We may not insulate a pot of hot water on Yom Tov for use on Shabbat, even if an eruv tavshilin had been made, because a standard eruv tavshilin is not effective to permit insulating on Yom Tov for Shabbat. The commentaries explain the rabbis prohibited insulating a pot of hot water or hot food on Shabbat, for example, by wrapping it in wool. Insulating, which the Mishnah calls hatmana, literally hiding, is forbidden even on Yom Tov if the water will not be used on Yom Tov. Similarly, if Yom Tov falls on a Friday, one may not even insulate food on Yom Tov for that Shabbat, just as other acts of food preparation are prohibited on Yom Tov for Shabbat without an eruv tavshilin. Bet Shammai take this a step further. They forbid insulating food on Yom Tov for Shabbat even if an eruv tavshilin had been made. In their view, an eruv tavshilin allows only acts of food preparation that are similar to the one done to make the eruv itself. For example, if someone cooked for the eruv, he may only cook food on Yom Tov for Shabbat, but not bake bread and the like. And if someone baked bread for the eruv, he may only bake on Yom Tov for Shabbat, but not cook. Therefore, if the eruv tavshilin did not include insulating food, Bet Shammai prohibit insulating hot food or water on Yom Tov for Shabbat. They permit a person to insulate food on Yom Tov for Shabbat only if he had insulated food for the eruv. Rav explains, Bet Hillel on the other hand ruled that even if someone only cooked for the eruv, he may do any act of food preparation on Yom Tov for Shabbat, including insulating. And the Rav does tell us, Umiu begmara muchach de Bet Hillel nami bau patu basar. In the Gemara, it's established, it's proved that Bet Hillel require both a baked item and a cooked item, the chen halacha, and that is the halacha. The Mishnah continues, Ve'en zokfin et hamenorah b'Yom Tov, and we may not reassemble the parts of a candlestick on Yom Tov, because this resembles the melachav building, which is prohibited on Yom Tov. Bet Shammai hold that the melachav building applies not only to buildings, structures attached to the ground, but also to objects not attached to the ground. This opinion is known as Yesh Binyan B'Chelim. The prohibition of building applies to utensils. Putting back together the pieces of a candlestick which resembles building is therefore forbidden on the Shabbat and Yom Tov. It is not actual building because this type of candlestick is made to be taken apart and reassembled. But again, the problem is that it resembles the Melachav building. Bet Hillel, however, hold that the Melachav building does not apply to utensils and Binyan B'Chelim. In their opinion, then, one may reassemble a candlestick on Yom Tov, provided that the parts can be inserted without force, as is brought down in Orach Chaim, chapter 519, Halakha 2. Then ofin pitin giritzin el rekikin. We may not bake thick loaves, numerous loaves, as Rav writes, as explained by Tosfot Yom Tov and the Rambam commentary. A large number of loaves was called thick because they were needed as one large thick dough. So again, we may not bake thick loaves, numerous loaves of bread in Yom Tov, if these are more bread than is needed for the Yom Tov, because it is forbidden on Yom Tov to expend more effort than necessary, as the Rav explains based off the Gemara on page 22b in Masechet Beitzah. Rather, we may bake only thin loaves, the few loaves actually needed. Now, according to Bet Hillel, though, we may bake numerous loaves at one time, even if more bread than necessary will be produced. Their reason is that filling the oven with many loaves leaves less empty space in the oven, which causes the heat to be more concentrated, which in turn causes the necessary loaves to bake better. Now, Rabban Gamliel cites support for his third ruling. Amar Rabban Gamliel said, ממהן של בית אבא לא היו אופין פיתין גריצין אלא רקיקין. In all the days of my father's household, now the father of this Rabban Gamliel was Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel the first, the great-grandson of Hillel. He says, in all the days of my father's household, they would not bake thick loaves, numerous loaves of bread and Yom Tov, only thin loaves, a few loaves, therefore avoiding extra effort. Now the support is rejected by the sages. Amrulo, they said to him, Ma na'aseh lebet avicha? What shall we do with this practice of your father's household? It does not prove that baking thick loaves is generally prohibited. Shimachmirin anatman, because they were stringent in this matter for themselves. Umkilin lechol Yisrael liot ofin pitin gritzin v'chori. But they ruled leniently for all the other people of Israel and allowed them to bake thick, numerous loaves of bread and even to make coal-baked bread, which requires even greater effort. Coal-baked loaves were large doughs baked directly on coals. To bake them properly, one had to make a very large pile of burning coals. Despite the additional effort required, Rabban Gamliel's father permitted others to bake such bread on Yom Tov. Although the members of his own household refrained from doing so, that does not indicate the halakha, because in this matter they committed themselves personally to go beyond the requirements of the law. And the Rav does tell us, Ven halakha ki Rabban Gamliel b'chol ma shemachmir k'divrei Beit Shammai. The halakha does not follow the opinion of Rabban Gamliel, who was strict in these three cases, like Beit Shammai. And that is in a Mishnah Vav. Mishnah Zayin lists three lenient rulings of Rabban Gamliel that were disputed by the sages. The Mishnah begins, Afu amar shlosha dvarim la'akel. In addition, he ruled more leniently than the sages in these three matters. Mechabedin ben amitot. We may sweep food from between the couches on which people recline when eating. The Rav explains in the times of the Gemara, people often reclined on couches when they ate. Now, the reason that Rabban Gamliel allowed sweeping food from between the couches is there is little concern that in such a small area, one might fill in small holes and thereby level the floor of the Melachav building. We may place incense on burning coals on Yom Tov to emit a pleasant aroma, despite this being a melacha kindling, because it increases one's joy on Yom Tov. Here Rabban Gamliel followed Beit Hillel's rule that since melachot are permitted for food preparation, they are also permitted for other Yom Tov needs, as taught in chapter 1 Mishnah 5 and chapter 2 Mishnah 5. Ve'osin gidi mikulas belele psachim. And we may roast a young goat together with its innards on Pesach nights, because that is how the Pesach offering was roasted, and one thereby commemorates the offering. The Torah requires the Pesach offering to be roasted on a spit with its knees and innards at its sides, as the Torah says in Sefer Shemot, chapter 12, Pasuk 9. Rabban Gamliel permitted people in his time after the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash to roast a young goat, one of the animals eligible for the Pesach offering, in this manner, and eat it at the Seder meal so that the offering would be remembered. Rabban Gamliel disagrees with the sages who forbid this practice, because one who eats a goat roasted this way at the Seder meal appears to be violating the prohibition of eating a sacred offering outside Yerushalayim. Now the sages disagree. The Mishnah says, V'chachamim osrin, but the sages prohibit these three acts. They forbid sweeping between the couches, because that might lead to filling in holes in the floor of melacha elsewhere in the house. They prohibit placing incense on burning coals, because that is not the practice of ordinary people and is not considered a Yom Tov need. The Torah states in Sefer Shemot chapter 12 pasuk 16, that which is eaten or otherwise enjoyed by all people, that alone may be done for you. By adding all people, the verse teaches that melacha may be done in Yom Tov only for a need that is common to all or most people, what we call davar hashaveh lechol nefesh. Therefore, the Rav says burning spices to create a pleasant aroma is not permitted on Yom Tov, because this was done only by a few, namely those who were especially particular about the aroma in a room, or those with strong body odor. They also forbid roasting a young goat together with its innards on Pesach nights, because this was a specific requirement of the Pesach offering, and doing so might cause people to think that one is eating a Pesach offering outside Jerusalem, which is forbidden. And the Rav does tell us, V'alacha kechachamim, the halacha follows the opinion of the sages. And that is in Rabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai leolam. Amen v'amen.